Next section will begin. So the next session will be Dr. Liu Yiti's talk. So Dr. Liu is an assistant professor from Department of English Language Education, the Education University of Hong Kong. Her main research interests includes content language integrated learning, discourse analysis, social linguistics, and critical cultural studies. She has been involved in collaboration with school teachers on curriculum design and classroom pedagogy for CLIL or LAC in a number of national contexts. ET's research publication will appear or have appeared in major international journals such as Discourse and Communication, Assessment and Evaluation in Higher Education, International Journal of Bilingual Education and Bilingualism, Critical Inquiry in Language Studies, and Journal of Language, Identity and Education. So Dr. Liu's topic today is translanguaging and transknowledging towards critical and inclusive CLIL plurilingual settings. So let's pass the ball to Dr. Liu. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hyun, for the very kind introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I feel very privileged and humble for the opportunity to be able to deliver a talk at Hong Kong Metropolitan University. So my talk this afternoon is on translanguaging and transknowledging towards critical and inclusive CLIL in plurilingual settings. And before we delve into the details of the talk, so in this afternoon, I will begin my talk with some connotation about critical CLIL, because I think both critical and CLIL are some buzzwords in applied linguistics nowadays. And also, I'm going to talk about the issue of inclusive education, or how to address learner diversity in CLIL. And also, I'm going to share two stories in my research journey. So the first story is about the English medium gender education in Hong Kong secondary schools. And the second story is about teacher collaboration in early primary CLIL classrooms of learner diversity. And I hope to have dialogues and conversation about how to address relevant issues in CLIL. So firstly, as we have noticed, and that have been numerous bilingual education programs, and bilingual education programs have become increasingly popular nowadays around the world. And content and language integrated learning, abbreviated as CLIL, is one example of such programs. So for those of us new to the field of CLIL and bilingual education, CLIL is a dual-focused education program using an additional language to teach both the content and the language. So I think this is actualized in Hong Kong as English medium instruction. And in some European contexts, CLIL has been perhaps been actualized as French medium instruction and other European languages. So different regions and different nations may have their own version of CLIL. And then research has indicated actually significant challenges in teaching and learning of CLIL. For those new to the CLIL area, we may already notice that actually CLIL sounds quite familiar or similar to some other programs such as EFL, English as a foreign language. So in this kind of program, so the educational goal and outcomes would be more language driven. And we also have EAP, so English for academic purposes, and also English for specific purposes, and also CLIL. So you can see that CLIL is situated pretty much in the middle of the language-driven goals and the content-driven goals of these continuum, and also content-based language teaching, immersion, and English medium instruction. So there are different models and different ways of teaching the content and language in the classrooms. And then some of the challenges will include, for example, the difficulties in learning through a less familiar language, while teachers may not have enough expertise or experience in teaching content area subjects in the second language. I think from Dr. Jack Poon's talk just now, we have noticed that actually it's not simple for science teachers to teach the subject-specific vocabulary or language use via a second language. So you can imagine that the same would apply to other disciplines, for example, social sciences, etc. So this is one area of the difficulties. And the second, the other concerns would pertain to the availability of teaching resources, amount of teaching time, and also students' learning diversity, curriculum design, and classroom practices. So for example, in a lot of projects that I conducted with the local school teachers, when we had meetings to discuss possible pedagogical innovation in either their English medium classrooms or extended learning activity time, when we look at the textbooks, you may find that, on one hand, there will be a lack of scaffolding for the subject-specific literacy. For example, not many textbooks would really highlight the language features beyond the lexical levels and really enable the student to give an elaborate responses either verbally or through some like multimodal drawing. So this is one major issue. And another is amount of teaching time, because in an internal service project at EDHK, we conducted pedagogical collaboration with over 10 secondary schools in Hong Kong. And actually, they were very eager to develop extra resources for the students lagging behind in their English medium subjects. But actually, they often, even though they have the good intention, many teachers complained that there was not enough teaching time, not enough teaching time because there was a lot to cover. And on the other hand, their time at school is pretty much packed with all different kinds of tasks, including administrative tasks, right? So there was a lack of teaching time and also lesson planning time. And also students' learning diversity. I think it has been well documented in the research literature that, on one hand, the outstanding students or above average students, they were very much prepared to do the English medium studies right at the beginning of their secondary school. But for those, weaker students or struggling students, many teachers were complaining they were run out of ways to support them. I think this quote was not from my own research experience, but I think it has been well documented in the research literature. And then curriculum design, yes, the teachers are very eager to help and support the students, but there was a lack of principled and systematic way to plan the lessons and also conduct the lessons to provide both pre-planned scaffolding and spontaneous scaffolding. So curriculum design and also classroom practices. So some issues were identified. And but however, notwithstanding challenges in CLIL, the use of everyday multimodal resources such as popular culture has been found useful in facilitating foreign language learning. So we see that actually when we allow multiple resources, multiple meaning-making resources to be used flexibly in the classroom, it will do a lot of good, not just in terms of, pedagogical benefits, but also it can facilitate the students' learning motivation and engagement. And indeed, in the fields of applied linguistics and bilingual education, new theoretical approaches, including translanguaging and transsemioticing, have emerged to support the judicious use of multiple semiotic resources. Actually, I think in the last 2 decades, there are many research papers written on translanguaging, in different schooling levels and in different national contexts. So I think for those of us new to these theories and areas, I would like to take a moment to explain the gist of the theories. So translanguaging, here abbreviated as TL, was first coined in Welsh in 1994 to denote a bilingual pedagogical practice. For example, allowing multiple language varieties or meaning-making resources in the classroom. And translanguaging is a meaning-making process that goes not just between, but beyond the conventional language boundaries and systems. So I think this theoretical stance would really differentiate translanguaging from code switching because the focus here is the holistic repertoire of the students and the language users. So we are not looking at the structural differences or whether this is L1, L2, or L3, but rather we are looking at the dynamics and the flow of meaning making. And so we are looking at what kinds of meaning-making resources are being drawn upon, whether it's language or it's like gestures or body language or other, physical objects in the immediate environment. So it's really moving beyond the boundaries. And so as we can see from the trans prefix, so it emphasizes its transcending capacity. And also it's a fluid, spontaneous, and dynamic process. So echoing with Halliday's notion of trans-semiotic, for those of us interested in social semiotics, we know that actually social semiotics has its theoretical roots in the Halliday systemic functional linguistics, and echoing with Halliday's notion of trans-semiotic. So trans-semiotizing has been coined by Professor Angela Lin from the Department of English Language Education at EGHK to conceptualize plurilingualism. And then it refers to the well-coordinated, multisensory, whole-body nature of sense-making. So it's not just about transcending language boundaries. But of course, I think translanguaging has already moved beyond transcending language boundaries and also looked at the coordination and interaction about different meaning-making resources. But here, transsemioticing is, going on to focus more on the coordination and the multisensory meaning-making resources and processes. So it refers to the examination of the verbal as well as the non-verbal semiotics. Semiotics here refer to the meaning-making resources, such as bodily movements, facial expressions, sounds, and color. And you can see that because of the advancement of technology, nowadays we are able to capture such rich and exciting dynamics in human interaction. Whereas I think decades ago, maybe, or at the very beginning of applied linguistic studies, the scholars were not so, fortunate to be able to capture the rich dynamics. Yeah. And then in the area of CLIL, actually translanguaging and transsemiotising has been used as a theoretical lens to examining, different meaning-making processes in different domains and areas of education. But here I just focused on CLIL. So several important functions have been documented in CLIL. So firstly, translanguaging and transsemiotising has been documented to provide pedagogical scaffolding for learning both content knowledge and academic language, and afford identity and culture affirmation. Because we know that behind the language variety, there is culture and there is identity, right? And of course, a language is a very important resource for constructing and reconstructing personas and identities. So actually, when certain meaning-making resources or a language variety has been drawn upon in the classroom, it is affirming some kind of culture and some kind of identity. And the second important function is it has provided access to scientific discourse practices in an English or other language, dual language middle school, for example, in this study. I think also in Dr. Jeppun's research studies, these important function has been affirmed again and again. And also it has the function of constituting a resource for joint negotiations of the scientific content in the science CLIL classrooms. And also it has facilitated dialoguing and knowledge co-construction in content-based education settings, as exemplified in these studies. And then ultimately, when we talk about translanguaging and transsemiotising, we have come across, important processes of transcending the boundaries. And now, the recent development, one of the major recent developments in translanguaging and transsemiotising studies is to move towards transknowledging, because previously when we have language as a noun, we suggest that actually we can look at the process of using language to mean, to know. And then we are actually turning knowledge, from a certain objects or certain set of information to a process. So here, transknowledging actually is about enabling diversity of meaning making by validating previously denigrated knowledge and ways of seeing, organizing, or relating to the world. So it has been argued that it is actually advocating epistemic justice as part of an agenda for social change. So maybe some of you would be wondering why am I, suddenly throwing out epistemic justice? It's because, for example, in the English medium classrooms, we often see the textbooks, for example, history textbooks or social sciences textbooks, not only written in a second language. In many cases, in EMI context, it would be English, but because no language would be politically neutral. So behind the description using another language, there would be a certain political stance or a political or a certain viewpoint being portraying the knowledge and the so-called facts. So if we do not give a critical lens or enable our students to have a critical lens, some Anglocentric or perspectives or viewpoints that are more specific to a Western context would be perpetuated and accepted without any critical consideration. Whereas the knowledge of the global South or the students' everyday life or their home culture would be somehow depressed and silenced. So it's very important that while we are giving students access to knowledge and also an additional language in the EMI context, we're also giving voices to the students, to their culture and to their own ways of making knowledge. So, and actually, in order to understand the processes of translanguaging and semiotising and also transknowledging, it would be very useful to draw upon the other latest developments in translanguaging, that is translanguaging as flows, as elaborated in Lanke and in 2022. So translanguaging as flows has drawn upon T-Bot's 2011's distributed language view. Actually, we have languages, in this time it's not a process, but a certain entity. So languages, when we say it, is the second order language. So the second order language is a result of imposition and constraint on first order languaging from historical, political, and institutional forces. That is, originally, as human beings, we would have the intuition to use all the resources that we know, that we have in our brain, to make sense of the world. But then somehow, suddenly we say, oh, this is language 1 and this is language 2. So this kind of differentiation is actually imposed by, for example, laws and policies, right? So here we say this is a kind of second order language. So they are the cultural institutional constructions on longer and slower time scale, because it takes a lot of time to have a certain policy, for example, language policy, right? And certain law regarding education and language use. And then we have languaging. So here we have language as a certain process, right? So this is first order languaging as the intrinsic expressivity and interactivity of human bodies in interaction. So usually the first order languaging is dialogic, involving different voices and dialogues. You have your own little, inner voice, and you have conversation with the outside world, others' voices, and also the laws and policies, right? And also it's whole body sense making. And so, according to these theoretical perspective, translanguaging is not a purely individual phenomenon. So it has a material history with flows of material, energy, information, and with other people in the community. So if we look at the process of knowledge making and sense making, not only from our individual or people's point of view, you would see that actually whenever we make meaning with languages, there is a history behind it. And also there is objective condition that enable such a meaning-making process. So for example, a student may like to use a very colloquial way of expression in the classroom. So the reason why this student has this preference will have its link or root in their own family, right? Or in a certain community. So if we take a step back, we can find that actually there is a history and there is objectivity and there is certain flow of material and energy behind the whole process. So if we do not take a human-centric view, then we can see that if we take an alternative view to it, we can see that actually the individuals, the people, you and me, together at this moment, we are the meeting point of flows of the community and the past and present. Just take a very, everyday example. The reason why we can have this hybrid mode at this moment and why we use Zoom as a platform for dialoguing and having, academic exchanges, I think it has a history too with our COVID, right? Where we had a lot of the teaching and learning conducted via Zoom. So actually the ways of living and also our human body is actually can be seen as the meeting points of different energy, of different resources, and of different histories. And then, so if we take into, just now we have explained a little bit about the theoretical approaches that I would like to introduce later for the research stories that I would like to share. But if we take a closer look into the recent research trends in CLIL, for example, we can actually see that currently CLIL research has been characterized by two major theoretical positions. So firstly, we have the second language acquisition tradition. I think in this research area, there are, numerous and fruitful studies and research findings by colleagues in Hong Kong and also overseas. And then we also have the social cultural theories, discourse analysis, and both of which stem from applied linguistics. But what is lesser explored would be the critical approach. With the critical approach, that is recognizing how CLIL is continually discursively constructed and remains a perpetual site of struggle. So this critical approach is self-explored. And of course, I understand that there are, three major traditions to criticality. When we first talk about critical, people would think that, it's criticizing or it's differentiating the good from the bad. But actually, this is only emphasizing the first approach of criticality, which refers to focusing on the openness of the text meaning and looking at the truth or false value of certain statement or certain facts. So this is the first approach of to criticality. But there are other approaches, for example, looking at or interpreting the human interaction in relation to the social context. So this is the second interpretive approach. And the third approach is the emancipative approach, that is focusing on social inequality and also focusing on examining the power dynamics in human interaction. And here, when I suggest, for a critical approach or critical CLIL, I'm focusing on examining the discursive construction of social inequality and the issues of inequality in the education context. So, but if we zoom into the critical CLIL approach, amid the emerging critical research in CLIL, much has been discussed in terms of, for example, the enactment of language ideologies and also issues of identities, values, and perceptions, so certain ways of looking at certain identities and languages. However, what remains lesser known is how to raise CLIL students' critical awareness about the hierarchy of other structures of domination inherent in the CLIL curriculum, while providing access to the dominant language varieties of languages and registers. And another research gap in CLIL would be we have got fruitful research studies in the secondary education context, but then leaving other educational contexts less explored. And also, there is another research gap, that is the attention to the issue of learner diversity. Actually, we can see that if you take a look around the world, you can find that attention to learner diversity is an indispensable feature of any education system based on our policy, right? Based on the black and white policies. And learner diversity is an inherent human condition from diversity in prior ideas, experiences, knowledge, attitudes, different learning styles, and multiple intelligences to social cultural disadvantage, health restrictions, intellectual capacities. Sometimes we have especially, gifted students, whereas we have students with special educational needs, special language requirements, disabilities, or serious personality disorders. And it's just a pity to see that actually research into catering to diversity within the CLIL programs is still very much at infancy. Because if we look at the existing CLIL literature, we can find that it seems to be still focusing on perfectly, able-bodied and also, relatively, good intellectual capacities, right? Because if you look at the context of Hong Kong, in order to get into the English medium instruction programs, students have to attain relatively higher scores and some kind of assessments. So we are really looking at the advantage or more fortunate students. But how about the rest? For those who are struggling with paying close attention, in the classrooms, and how about those with other, physical challenges? So because CLIL, on the outset is to promote equality, equal access to language. But actually, when we implement CLIL, we are leaving behind quite a major population of the students. So it's an issue that is worth further exploration. So exploration of CLIL in primary settings and learning environments with students of diverse needs is much warranted. And given the documented affordances of translanguaging and trans-semiotising, the following two case studies explore translanguaging and trans-semiotising as ways of furthering the critical and inclusive education in CLIL programs. So this is from the first case study. So it's I just did it some years ago. So in this case study, translanguaging and trans-semiotising has been drawn upon as pedagogy to scaffold the students' development in both the content area. So in this case, it is gender education and also the subject-specific literacy. So it's for translanguaging for doing gender in English medium classrooms in Hong Kong. And if we look at gendered discourses in education, you can find that, for example, it's been usually seen as a biological category. And sometimes sex and the term sex and gender would be seen as relatively the same in some curriculum documents. And but in my study and also in the pedagogical intervention, when I discuss with the teachers, we would like to promote a more fluid view towards gender. And also in the study, I frame gender as a product of social interaction, as well as a kind of resources that interlocutors creatively draw upon to perform different aspects of their social identities in the classroom context. So gender discourse can be considered on two interrelated micro and macro levels, including the interactional styles and also the social practices. And if we zoom into our education field, we can see that the division of gender roles somehow, is reconstructed in teaching and learning school subjects. And in addition to textual or visual underrepresentation of females in the textbooks, binary monolithic positioning about masculinity and femininity is still embodied in the everyday classroom interaction. And gender issues are not given due attention in Hong Kong, as it has been advocated by Choi 2012. And opportunities for students to discuss gender at school are rare, meaning that open dialogue about gender and gender identity may be stunted. So although translanguaging is considered conducive to CLIL, existing studies mainly focus on disciplinary literacy or critical language awareness, and little is explored about systemic translanguaging and trans-semioticizing or trans-registering pedagogy for enhancing critical gender awareness. So I want to see whether it works in the Hong Kong classrooms and how it works. So in my study, I raised two research questions. So the first is what and how are the gendered discourses constructed in the CLIL classroom interaction? And then using the MEC framework. So this is a pedagogical framework for designing the curriculum in the unit of work. And also what is the impact of the translanguaging pedagogy exemplified by the MEC framework in students' development of critical gender awareness. So basically, this is a design-based ethnographic case study. So I worked with over 200 Hong Kong Secondary 4 students and 4 liberal studies teachers in an English medium secondary school. So that was quite some several years ago, so we still had liberal studies. The students, the participants were the teachers, 2 teachers here. And we had teacher collaboration with the university researcher. So in this case, that is me. And also, we would like to design a new gender stereotypes unit based on the multimodalities in textualization cycle, MEC cycle. So this pedagogical framework allows translanguaging and opens up the space for trans-semioticizing in the classroom. So we used this framework for designing the pedagogical innovation for integrating multimodal and multilingual scaffolding for CLIL. And we had some classroom observation and student interviews. And we find that actually, of course, somehow there was still a binary construction of gender, because I think the kinds of gender discourses, were constructed not only by the students and the teachers involved, but also the classroom was actually situated in the broader curriculum context in which sometimes gender is considered on binary poles, okay? It's a factor, males and females, rather than seeing, oh, actually, we can have alternative masculinities and femininities. And also, we have seen co-construction of masculinities. And in my study, if you're interested, you can take a look at the data and the discourse analysis there. So because of the translanguaging and also trans-semioticizing space created by the teacher in the classroom, there are different kinds of perceptions and also categorizations of men and women. So in this case, we have the construction of real men, okay, who are true to their very traditional gender values, and we have good men, and we have the so-called gay men, okay. And we also have the traditional and alternative gender values reconstructed in the interviews afterwards with the student, I mean, right after the unit of work in the study. So, of course, you can say, oh, you still have the traditional gender values into the interviews. But of course, yes, because individuals are just the meeting points of different histories. We cannot expect to change everything everything, you know, in one night is impossible. So the change would be gradual, but at least we see alternative discourses, alternative practice, alternative identities being constructed and gradually emerging from the whole process. So this is the first story. And the second story is spontaneous teacher collaboration in co-teaching early primary CLIL classrooms of learner diversity. So this is still being reviewed by one of the international journals, but I would like to share some of the major findings here. Because as we can see in the CLIL literature, when we talk about teacher collaboration, we always focus on the well-planned, okay, in the short term, in the midterm, in the long term, what we can do. So we have got, rich research findings, a lot of empirical studies, and a lot of guidelines on this. But I think what is less noticed is about the spontaneous teacher collaboration. And to be honest, in the collaboration with the teachers, we did have well-planned teacher collaboration, by which I mean, all kinds of lesson planning meetings, all kinds of formal documents that we put up together, and also the different worksheets. We did the study for 2 years. I actually spent 2 years in 3 primary schools in Hong Kong, using the MEC framework as a way to facilitate the students' engagement in the CLIL classrooms. Well, when we talk about CLIL classrooms here, we do not mean that the 3 primary schools that we worked with are actually English medium primary schools, but quite on the contrary, we are doing this pedagogical innovation in some special lesson time in the semesters. So we had a lot of opportunities to explore various collaboration. So we had 2 government-aided primary schools located in working class neighborhoods in Hong Kong, with 2 classes in each grade. So the pupils were all beginners in learning English. So they had diverse prior English language knowledge about the CLIL units. So demonstrated by the pre-text results examining existing knowledge about the key vocabulary of the units, and also the target sentence patterns for information reports. Because in our project, we use the process genre approach to facilitating students' development of English literacy. So basically, we focus on the descriptive text type or descriptive genre, the information report, and the post-test was conducted via a writing task of the information report genre at the end of each unit, where the target language features in the pretext were supposed to be used. And also, we can see in the classes different ethnicity and also different social backgrounds, and also there were SEN students in the classroom. So to cater for the potential needs of pupils of dyslexia, and also we have new arrival students. So the teachers involved decided to employ flexible, multilingual, and also multisensory pedagogy. So the MEC framework was introduced to teachers in a professional sharing workshop as a heuristic tool, and also the English and GS teachers, general studies teachers, and also the school's head of curriculum development sat down together with the university team. And then we did some curriculum mapping between the English and the GS subjects, and also explored ways of using the MEC framework. So you can take a look at some of the stages and activities at School A, all right? So we use the MEC framework as the heuristic tool. And this is also the units at School B. And the findings would be, we can see that the classroom-based teacher collaboration for addressing learner diversity in CLIL illustrate a series of fluid translanguaging and trans-semiotizing practices in training multiple meaning-making resources. So the spontaneous teacher collaboration practices include, so firstly, collaborating and engaging students in co-constructing the thematic patterns in the target academic genre. So I would like to take a moment to switch to another screen so that you can see what I'm referring to. So you can see that although the teachers, you can see that, oh, actually they are just standing, in different parts of the classrooms, but actually, all what they are doing would come down together to a very intricate and very interesting process of constructing thematic patterns of the knowledge. So so these are the different in this unit, in this moment, the teachers wanted to teach the differentiation between paws and hands, human hands and paws, when they taught the terms of different animal terms in this unit. And you can see that if we examine the whole interaction process, we can come up to see that, oh, actually, they are going back and forth in co-constructing the thematic patterns, that is the knowledge about animal body parts, and also very strategically integrated the teaching of subject-specific sentence patterns, that is the language of description and also language of definition, which later were transthematized into the students' writing. So later, when we looked at students' writing in the post-test, we can also see that these language features were used and drawn upon by the students. And another moment in the interaction, because of the time, I would just go through to the next example. So in this case, Ella. So Ella, this is the pseudonym of a student, and this student had some challenges in reading and writing. So previously, if we take a look at her writing, you could see that she did not really command the conventions of written English. For example, no space between words. And in other assignment samples by this student, we could also see mirroring of certain written letters. And then at first, the student, because this student, although she was very young, only in P1, she was a little bit embarrassed because she could not really write English very well, and sometimes she could not read very well in front of the whole classroom. So at first, she did not want to participate in the drama activity in this CLIL unit. But somehow, the native English teacher and the CLIL teacher helped her with all kinds of resources, with body language, with hand gestures, and a lot of different scaffolding practices in the process. She overcame the hurdle and completed the reading aloud task. This is a second task that we examined successfully. And at the end of P1, we could see that she did a much better written work. And in this case, she also drew a very, very cute and lovely picture with happy faces of the animals. I think it can somehow reflect the positive mindset and also attitude she had towards learning English. So what I would like to suggest is that actually through collaborating in engaging students in co-constructing the thematic patterns. And also, sometimes the teachers would need some disciplining spaces in classroom contingencies, and also, using translanguaging and semioticizing as a means of knowledge brokering and foregrounding their achievements, we could see a lot of encouraging results in our teaching and learning. So, some implications. I think, well, firstly, although these are just like case studies, but it has given us some opportunities to see the potentials of translanguaging and transsemiotizing for CLIL. And firstly is the non-coercive rearrangement of desires and also views and attitudes in the trans space. Because when we look at the first story, the first case in which we had the English medium gender education, so it would take the teachers and also the students a lot of time to have transformation in their identity and gender values. So, so that if we want to have have the opportunity to enable the change, we need to create spaces, non-coercive spaces. And the second implication is that actually translanguaging and the opportunities of transknowledging, that is allowing the students' own voices and their own culture to be acknowledged and drawn upon in the classroom is very important because it can empower both the CLIL teachers and the students. And also this empowerment process would take the, some well-planned systemic ways of doing things. And also we cannot ignore the spontaneous and dynamic resources. And the third implication is that critical CLIL, well, when we talk about critical CLIL, we still most focus on, for example, racial linguistic ideologies. But I think perhaps it's time for us to also look at ways and also the difficulties or the struggles of the students of diverse learning needs, and also take inclusive education into the radar of critical CLIL. And also encourage compassion for the underrepresented and the marginalized. So this is what I would like to share with everyone. So thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you so much for your very pedagogical oriented talk, very practical and also inspiring as well. So from the audience online on site, do you have any questions on Dr. Liu's talk? Yeah.
Thank you, April, for this very interesting talk. I would like to ask more about how you observe those teachers doing the collaboration, because from my observation in Hong Kong, teachers quite often very reluctant to do professional training or collaboration with university professor or engage with this kind of context, right? So can you elaborate more how you can get those teachers on board for your two projects, and also how they understand or conceptualize the term like CLIL and all this kind of project that you're doing? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack, for this very important question. I think this is the challenge for us, EMI and CLIL researchers and practitioners as well. I think to cultivate a kind of trust is the very important first step. Actually, I have to say that when I first began the projects, I tried, my very best to find participants from my own professional networks. So this would be the first step. But gradually, I think when we had some good collaboration with schools and teachers, I think because the words of mouth, they would recommend their friends, in the workplace or other colleagues to join. And then, yeah, I think this is my approach of doing things at the very moment. But I think what is important is to build up the trust between the university team and also the school teachers, and also try to develop a certain kind of trends approach. That is, we for example, we need to put ourselves really into the teacher's shoes and to really picture what would be the difficulties or challenges. And I think it's also important to showcase to the key stakeholders, students and also the school leaders and also maybe perhaps the parents to see the benefits of this approach. For example, the clear approach or the MEC pedagogical framework. I think enabling them to see the benefits more obviously and also build a mutual trust are very important in the teacher collaboration.
Thank you very much. I can see that by showing the student worksheet, right? You can see the progression of student learning about the English. And if the stakeholder understand there's a benefit of doing that, they will welcome this kind of initiation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really interesting. I'm wondering, putting your two talks together, the EMI and translanguaging, I'm just wondering how, I think EMI is kind of well understood, but in the context of Hong Kong schools, this translanguaging concept, I'm wondering how well, not how well, how the extent to which you're able to get the concept across readily. Is it easily understood when you go in and you start working in the schools? And then secondly, is it received well, or is it, I'm curious about what kind of response you get.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, I think based on the context and also like the language and education policy context here in Hong Kong, I think the flexibility or the space for translanguaging or flexible pedagogy would really vary. From the very prestigious schools, well, yeah, they would have, very much of a hesitation. But for the majority of the schools and also for the majority of the student population, they do not speak English as their first language. So I think initially there is an inherent need to use multiple resources and flexible pedagogy. So I think this would really motivate the teachers to really try everything possible in their own classroom.
Is there, do you sense any hesitation that it's being subversive? Because it's sort of bending the policy, right? A little bit.
Yes, indeed. Actually, I usually talked about it with my own PGDE students at U. So in our classroom, discussion, they always shared how difficult it was to use multiple language resources. But then I think I could really relay their good practices or their feasible practices. That is, they would try to use multiple languages in different forms. Not necessarily via the spoken form, the spoken mode, but perhaps in the written mode, So I think there are still different possibilities under the language and education policy here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. So we have two questions from Phoebe Siu online. Question number one, in terms of co-developing Chan Semiotic Agency for young learners, on top of the use of colors and drawing space for target language or target semiotics, have you explored the use of other audiovisual repertoires in your CLIO primary school classroom projects? For example, the use of children's song and animations for dialogic collaboration with teachers and children around the classroom, like target language or target semiotic space?
Yes, thank you so much, Phoebe, for your wonderful question. I think in my experience with working with early primary students and also their teachers, I have observed that it was not we, the university researchers, who really developed everything for them, but rather after some dialogues and conversations, when they grasped the notion of trans-semiotizing and also translanguaging, they took the initiative to develop such resources most suitable for their students. So, for example, they would. I think one of the schools actually made a song for the CLIO unit. It was sung by the music teacher, actually, and lyrics by the English teacher. So I think Hong Kong teachers are really enthusiastic in helping the students. So when they grasp the gist of different possible pedagogies, they would really test it and see whether they can, contextualize in their own classrooms. So we really need to encourage teacher agency, as Professor Andy Gao just mentioned in the morning.
Okay, thank you. So question number 2, in terms of using critical CLIL to develop gender discourse materials and target language or target semiotic awareness among secondary school young learners, any further insight shared with teachers and parents collaborative unit from your project? Parent-Teacher Association may benefit from your research findings.
Yes, thank you very much, Phoebe. Yes, but I'm afraid that in the research study, I did not really explore homeschool collaboration. But I think this is a very valuable venue for further exploration in CLIL. Thank you very much, Phoebe.
Okay, so thank you so much. I think this is the end of this session. So we will begin the roundtable in 20 minutes time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So welcome back. This is the last section of today's symposium, the roundtable. So I hope this will be an exciting roundtable to you all. And let me introduce myself again. I'm Dr. Winfred Shan from ENL Hong Kong MU. I'm going to chair this roundtable for you guys. Next to me, we have Professor Andy Gao from University of New South Wales, Australia. And then we have Professor Melinda Wong from Hong Kong UST. And then we have Dr. Liu from Education University of Hong Kong. And also we have Dr. Jack Poon from City of Hong Kong. So thanks for their very inspiring and fruitful talks this morning and this afternoon. We got a lot from their sharing, especially on applied linguistics and language education. So I'm going to talk about the roadmap for this roundtable. We're going to talk about for 45 minutes, and I will ask questions, and then I pose a question to the panelists, and they'll answer our questions. And then for the rest of the 15 minutes, and we will open the door for the audiences online or on site. And okay, so as we can see, the theme of this symposium is called Appliable Linguistics and Language Education Symposium. It actually matches our university's strategic plan. As we all know that Hong Kong government just launched a plan to develop more University of Applied Sciences. So just learned from the news yesterday, South China Morning Post. It says that Hong Kong MU is very likely to be the next first one University of Applied Sciences in Hong Kong. So so that's why we invite you guys here. We need more research, inform our education, and also know how to apply those research findings into our current practices of education and also language teacher training, etc. So first of all, I would like to pose the first question about this applied thing. The first question is, as you know, in the current research paradigm, lots of papers, published findings, just published, and then they just put aside, there is a real gap. Here I quote Professor Wong, there's a gap, so researcher know their research finding, the project, what they have done, but however, practitioner seldom got those inspiration or implication of practices from those research projects. So the question is, how have you integrated your research finding into your current areas of studies, especially in your local institution? And do you have any story to share and also any anecdotes? Thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. A couple of thoughts. It feels a bit, to apply sciences. From what I said, my perspective this morning, a researcher needs to do research. Yes. And it feels a little bit, am I allowed to say unfair? It seems a little unfair to ask and to require the researchers to then do the second step, and I read so many papers, classroom research, and into the conclusion, there's 2 sentences, implications for the classroom. And for a while, it used to bother me that, oh, how come you can't do better? But then I've kind of come to this other position that actually it's just not fair. Do the research, hand it over, let the practitioner come back and apply it. And then let's get the dialogue going. So my answer is to you, I don't want to apply my research anymore. It's not my, it's asking too much. Let's let the practitioner, the people who are on the receiving end, let's let them do the application, report back, and then have the researchers try again if something's,
Thank you.
Right. My experience, many years ago, some years ago, I did my PhD on language learning strategies. And I trying to use the idea of agency to explain why language learners adopt particular strategies. So in my thesis, I had this idea of agency as as sort of one of the major or kind of theoretical perspective to explore and understand language learners' strategic learning behaviors. So then after I did my PhD, I put the kind of thesis idea aside, and I sort of work on language teacher education. So I do a lot of work on language education policy and language teacher education. And then I think a few years ago, or maybe a couple of years ago, the Oxford University Press was trying to launch a new series of textbooks. I think that kind of textbook reflects a thinking of what should be the goals, or what the goals of a language education should be. And in the past, we tend to focus on teaching the language. And then I think the Oxford University textbook series, and trying to argue that it's not just about teaching language, because language education or language teaching is also education. So it's also more about helping language learners to grow as persons, as human beings with desirable attributes or skills, competence. So there's a lot of emphasis on the kind of learning languages to achieve or to acquire this kind of desirable skills, attributes. They have a series of things, attributes, for instance, language learners at the end of language education are willing to take risks, and they're resilient, they are creative in responding in response to the kind of challenges in learning process, that kind of attributes. And then decided that maybe we need a term to capture the kind of root process going on underlying these observable characteristics and behaviors of language learners. And then they used the idea of an agency. And all of a sudden, I was asked to by the Oxford University Press to do get involved a position paper with quite respectable scholars like Daniel Larson Freeman, Paul Dwyer, Sarah Mercer on learner agency. And also I was asked to deliver quite a few talks and workshop on language learner agency. And so then I realized that the ideas I used to play with as a PhD student can be applied to some extent for some sort of commercial purpose, like the textbooks, new textbooks that the Oxford University Press wants to promote. That's my experience.
It's very very inspiring, like how to transform our research into practice, and you have made it. I think this is very good.
Yes, I've got a lot of inspiration from the talks in this symposium, and I think just now Professor Wong and Professor Gao's responses have inspired a lot of thoughts in me, and also it has reminded me of some sharing from my PhD supervisor, Professor Angeline as well. She I think when I was a PhD student, she often reminded me to not just design something in the armchair and push it to the school teachers for them to try. And we really need to have this humble mindset and really get to know the context first and really get to know their needs before we really do the collaboration and try out the pedagogical intervention. Yeah.
I also share the same note like April. I think we need to communicate to our practitioner or frontline teacher. So like what in my talk I just mentioned, the project that I'm working, I do not start with something like a researcher. Okay, you need to study this theory or you need to learn about genre-based pedagogy. Instead, I would just sit with the teacher, school principal to understand the actual environment, the culture that the school develop, and then trying to mediate between what I plan to do and what they actually need in the classroom, and then come along and then develop the curriculum with them. I mean, the ultimate goal is we want the pedagogy, we want the intervention to be sustainable so that the teacher in the school can continue with this curriculum and more students can be beneficial at the end.
Thank you. So yeah, especially Professor Poon, how can you communicate with schools so well, because like it's so impressive from your PhD projects. You have worked so much, you know, in Hong Kong. It's really difficult to get into the primary school or secondary school to conduct research. So could you please share something as well? Or Andy, and do you have any idea from Australia context? Thank you.
Maybe I go first. I think I'm in a very disadvantaged position. First, I'm from the English department. We do not have graduate or student, studying and teaching in the school sector. So I have to start from scratch, like sending out messages, cold call, and go to school for visit and try to get them the trust that you mentioned, April, about seeing that the researcher coming in is not trying to observe or evaluate. Instead, we are coming in, giving a pair of additional hand to help you as a teacher or the school trying to develop some strategy or pedagogical intervention, trying to help improve the situation. So that's how I start with the school research. Maybe Andy, you can add more from Australia context.
Actually, it's been extremely difficult to get in school to do research. In Hong Kong and Australia, I think your experience also echo what I experienced as a researcher when I was at the University of Hong Kong. So it's difficult to get in school to do research, and partly because, and I have to say, this is probably to do with the disconnection between theory and practice. And teachers don't feel that the kind of work we do useful. It's really difficult for us to sell to them that we are doing something important for you. And I think that kind of a trustful relationship needs time to develop, and I don't really have a better answer to this kind of a problem or challenge. And I think it's probably we have to work on changing different stakeholders' perspectives, attitude towards the kind of research we do. We do want, like April just said, we do want to tell schools and teachers that we want to do something useful for them to improve their practice, and that's what we really want to do, and teach us how can we be of better help in our research.
I'm just wondering if sometimes we might try to think of different target avenues to achieve the same thing. And I'm wondering, at one point with my collaborators, we reached a point where we thought, we're aiming in the wrong place. We should be aiming at textbook writing and at course materials, because that's a lot of teachers don't have the luxury of the time teaching. So a conversation I had earlier, 36 hours a week. Yeah. But the materials are there. So if the, applied linguistics, if the linguistics side can come into the materials, then the teachers have it there. Yeah. So that was one thought. And then another avenue, the policy avenue.
Yes.
And I don't know. I think one reason I really like being here in Hong Kong and it's a small enough, big enough, but small enough community, and it just feels like with a little bit of joined up shared vision and it should be some potential for as educators, language educators, to try to influence policy here. Yeah, not me. I'll just suggest it.
I think you can, of course. You can, of course.
Guest here.
Well, absolutely. I just want to add to what Professor Wong just said. It's absolutely important for us to talk to this kind of the right audience, the textbook developers, curriculum developers, and also I think that we probably need a kind of a translators who can translate our research into something that could be understood by the people who are very busy in offices.
Yes, I also reckon with Professor Gao that actually we need a different set of language, like the everyday language, the general academic language, etc., to really translate it into layman terms, and also like talk about it in multiple venues like this symposium, right? so that we have our voices heard. And let our key stakeholders, parents, policymakers, and school leaders know about the latest development.
Thank you. So we are now in a post-pandemic world, and education has been transformed ever since then, right? So drastically, and I remember Andy's conclusion, we are actually in a brave new world. So to be a teacher, you need to be brave and confident and also be qualified. So we are doing language education program here in Hong Kong MU. And we just want to know, do you guys have any ideas on how to deal with, for example, post-pandemic teacher training? Because teachers may be required to teach both online or hybrids, for example. And also what Andy mentioned just now, some students just got kind of frightened or worried before they go to teaching practicum. So maybe because this is also related to what we call the, so there's technological or societal factors influence these kind of things. So any suggestions? Thank you.
It feels like it's a golden moment for language education because it feels like, yeah, because I think what we're talking about is a communication challenge and people being secluded in homes and not having that interaction. And we all know that language is much more than pronunciation and grammar.
Yes.
And it seems like a golden opportunity for us to be at the forefront to say, look, let us bring people together. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. What's going on? And it feels like using that, using our communication skills, getting people to enter a moment to say, look, language is more than grammar and pronunciation. We have the skills to bring people together, to have them talking with each other and having them explore why they're finding this a challenge. Why did the medium cause this? We were still interacting. So if people don't have who has this perspective, who has this background, but people like you who understand and explore and at this academic intellectual level understand these dynamics.
I think another, possible challenge in the post-pandemic teacher education or even school education would be mental health. Although we are not in the psychology discipline, I think we still have a lot to contribute. For me, for example, when we will often see advocacy for positive education nowadays, focusing on students' achievement, students' strengths. But I think from another perspective, possible education as actualized in language education can be seen as flexible pedagogy, acknowledging students' voices, acknowledging students' strengths, etc. So I think it also, has to do with my, talk and also Jack's talk about EMI and CLIO, using, multiple resources and flexible pedagogy, acknowledging the students' voices, identity, and culture. I think maybe this is one thing that we language educators and language teachers can do.
Thank you.
I've been thinking about these questions recently, and I think we have to ask us a few questions and in relation to the use of technology, because I know that technology can replace us in doing a lot of tasking and increasingly number of tasks in a much better way. But we have to ask our questions. First, there could be a few kind of different kind of tasks that we can happily to let machine to do them for us. For instance, we all happy we have a dishwasher or washing machine, because you don't want to go back to the time where you have to wash your clothes or dishes. Right, and these are kind of tasks we can happily let the machine do for us. But there's also a task although machine could possibly do for us, but we nevertheless want to do ourselves. For instance, if you imagine that if there was a robot who can do the cooking for us, are we happy to let the robot do the cooking for us forever, or we are happy that even though robot can do the cooking for us, we still want to do cooking for ourselves? And that could be something that robot or machine could never replace human beings. For instance, maybe I don't really know about the functionality of machines or technology. I just imagine that human beings could really provide a kind of human warmth and emotional support to each other, but that could be a misunderstanding or understatement or kind of or what the machines could do. Because I know in some countries people can marry to a robot, something like that. But I still believe that the kind of, for instance, teachers can provide a lot of emotional support to our students along in the process of learning and that sort of thing. That I hope that will not be replaced by technology.
Yeah, I want to echo Andy's, like, I mean, technology is one part of this post-pandemic change. And I also want to highlight that there are like several things that is changing the landscape of language education and teaching. For example, learning is not only happening in classroom context, it's beyond classroom, at home, and also 24 hours, 7 days in a week, you can still learning. So the role of teacher is no longer be the major focus. Maybe language teacher can be a facilitator, guiding our learner, guiding our children or students how to navigate this like learning trajectory about language development. And also parents, remember the pandemic like Zoom. So parent actually be the assistant teacher in many occasions, right? So
Too
whether,
much.
yeah, whether parent can also play a very important role in language teaching and learning because they pay the fee, they choose the school, they even choose the tutorial center. We have this industry sending the kids after school going to this tutorial center, having additional learning support, right? So I think there's a lot of things that we should research and explore. Thank you.
Yeah, talking about technology, so like ChatGPT, AI, it's a very hot topic nowadays, right? So do you guys have any ideas about like how ChatGPT will transform your areas of study? Like, for example, teacher education, EAP teaching, right? Clue or EMI. Do you have any ideas how like technology will?
I was just trying to reflect on the three questions I asked. I mean, and there are tasks that could be replaced by technology, and we happily let machine or technology to replace human beings for doing these tasks. There are also tasks that probably technology could do better than human beings, but nevertheless, we still want to do these tasks or retain these skills as human beings. And then the third question will be the kind of things that could never be 100% or completely replaced by technology or robots, like the example I provided just now, providing kind of human warmth or emotional support to each other, or other things like offering guidance or to our students or and these tasks. So presumably, if technology really takes a big hit sort of on language teacher education or teacher education, we might need to think about we have to think about reprioritizing in terms of what we should focus on in language teacher education or teacher education, whether we should put so much resources and efforts on the kind of things that could be replaced by technology. And we happily will let technology replace us in doing these kind of tasks, or we should focus on more on the kind of things that technology would never completely replace us, or we should focus on those the skills or competence that we want our human teachers to retain, regardless whether or not technology can do these tasks better than human beings.
Thank you.
So I am a bit of an optimist. And typically where there's threat, my brain immediately goes to opportunity. Yeah. Survival instinct. But I don't know, maybe I'm too optimistic, but with the Gen AI, when it came on the scene, my real feeling was, wow, maybe this really is going to push education to really change. when I look at education, what we're doing, it fits a world we don't live in anymore. In some really, really fundamental basic ways. The whole assessment driven, knowledge based, and we know that as educators, we do what we can, but I don't know, I'm holding out hope that it will push us to revolution. And in my own area with, let's say, academic writing, I guess, I don't know how much you've actually been trying these generative AIs, but when I look at the outputs, what comes out? I read it and I think, that's not me. That's just so, And I think I really building what Andy's saying, I think, yeah, okay, the machine can wash the dishes, right? The machine, but it's not me. And I think this whole idea of agency and what it will hopefully allow us to do is to take it to that next level and to then bring ourselves in. And then as educationalists, our system needs to be something that brings out that intrinsic and that has students getting where they need to be and choosing where they need to be and taking that responsibility. And so I don't know, a bit of an optimist, but I'm hoping all this will allow this.
Absolutely. I mean, measurable outcomes are probably things that could be done by technology and machines.
Because like language center, language teachers, and that is like lots of people kind of like, oh my God, we're going to be replaced by ChatGPT because like our teaching, APA, or essay writing, or editing revision, all these jobs can be done through like ChatGPT as well. So I mean, like as a head of language center, so how do you perceive these kind of like threats, and also how can you like lead your team to a kind of like unbeatable like state, to persuade the university to, okay, we have our value here.
Yeah.
We should continue.
Absolutely. So to me, our job is to jump in there first. Here's a brand new tool. Let's use it. Let's use it. And let's help our students immediately learn how to maximize what it can do. And so to me, it's not remotely that our jobs are threatened, but it is true that we've got to get our skates on and we have to quickly. And the way to do it is just to get in there and to try. And my feeling is that instead of being worried, the sooner to get in and try. My university, you may or may not know, is one of the first just to say, oh, we're doing it. We're embracing it, even before we kind of knew most of us knew what it was. But because of that, we had to. And the advantage of having to was nobody had very high expectations because no one knew what it was. So it gave us, when I'm listening to other places sometimes talking about they said, oh no, we better step back and make sure we understand what we're doing. We had the opportunity of trying and messing up, because when we said to our students, we're trying this, they also were not surprised if it didn't go well. So we could have this sort of co-construction, this dialogue with the students, and we could learn from experience by just going in there and just having the courage to try.
I think that actually the emergence of ChatGPT, the generative AI, has really posed important questions on language education and language teacher education, because I remember that when the tool first came up, and then some of my colleagues at ATHK shared with us that actually ChatGPT is not the cure for all the so-called language issues in EAP classes, for example, because my colleague at ELE at ETHK asked the class to actually use ChatGPT to to make some interesting paragraphs as reference for their assignments in the EAP courses, but actually only the more proficient students can make good use of ChatGPT and really appreciate the strengths of the output or the answers from ChatGPT, whereas the weaker students could not really appreciate, what are the strengths in the written responses, and they could not really make good use of the help from ChatGPT. So I think that actually we cannot say for sure whether generative AI is a friend or a foe, or whether it's useful for us, for our students. It really depends on the ability to make use of it. So I think actually it has opened up very important values and for further research and important research questions.
Yeah, I echo with April what she said. I think I mean, we shouldn't see generative AI as a threat. We should see it as an opportunity for EMI research. I think there's a valuable insight of using ChatGPT or generative AI to assist EMI content subject teacher. Maybe like this can be addressing the issue about, oh, they don't have a in-house or in-class language teacher. Maybe that can be a teacher assistant helping a student to navigate how to write a scientific report writing, etc. So I think go back to the starting point is just like computer first being introduced in the classroom. People have this very weird reaction, but now you cannot go to a classroom without a computer, right? So I think we need to educate, we need to teach the student how to use generative AI in a proper way, in an accurate way.
I give one little anecdote. Last spring, I was speaking to an engineering professor at UST, and he was saying, I love it because I've discovered that if students have to write into AI, they have to design something, they have to design, then when AI creates the image or it reflects, it shows how much the student understands, because if the student can't describe what it's supposed to make, immediately I can say, oh, they haven't learned what I've taught them. However, some students are clearly struggling with the language of how to instruct. Yeah. And so immediately AI opening up opportunities.
Oh,
Yeah, because language is so crucial. It's not, the AI is just, even the dishwasher, you have to push the button properly. You have to put the setting, right? Right? It's still a machine. Yeah. And you have to, it's the human ability to instruct. We know that prompt engineering is so crucial. And so, language doesn't disappear. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question will be about teacher agency. I think this is very interesting, I think, to our program. So how can we ensure that language teacher education programs are effectively fostering language teacher agency? Yeah.
This is a big question. I think it's like our language education, language teacher education probably have some sort of similarity, and then traditionally have teacher education has been focusing on skills and practices and the measurable outcomes, so that once they have demonstrated measurable outcomes, they are sort of become a qualified teachers. What we now need to focus on is developing, it's like an objective of our education practice, is that we want to grow or develop what we call subjects of education practice who can author the teaching practice. And so in a sense, it's not really focusing on the measurable outcome, but we are looking at the people who grow up and then they can use the ideas at their disposal, and they come up with their version of education practice or teaching that is appropriate for the context they ask it to teaching. And so what we call a so-called subjectification process,
It's like
becoming a subject of the person who can author, write their own teaching. Rather than in the past, we focus on qualification and demonstrable or measurable outcomes of and that teaching standards, for instance, are very important to see whether this person can be qualified for teaching. You have to tick. I mean, because I'm responsible for the professional experiences, and there's assessment form. We have a assessment form that lists all the teaching standards from the teacher accreditation body, and we told our student teachers, you go to the school, do the practice, and your supervising teacher has ticked all the standards as demonstrated. Otherwise, you'll fail the teaching practice. I think this is probably where we are now, but in the future, we should focus on a kind of person who can actually use all these ideas at their disposal and come up with a kind of appropriate teaching practice for the context they are expected or asked to teach in.
Yeah, I know, like, but still some students are kind of like frightened by the teaching practicum, especially like in Hong Kong, because like it seems that like our like standard, our society are not allowed our students to make mistakes at
Yeah,
work, you know?
well,
But like,
feeling stressed about teaching is quite normal. I think we all feel stressed about giving talks here.
but like, I just want to know, like, what's the practice in Australian context? Because like, I know that your school of education is really famous and must have a lot of like sharing on this topic, especially that you're in charge of the teaching practicum, right? I heard that.
No, Australia is actually is experiencing a serious school teacher shortage. So uh, which means it's good time for me to be the professional experience academic director responsible for teaching placement programs, because no school will refuse our student teachers. They're trying to support and trying to help our student teachers become qualified teachers. But I think that's not the point. I think that the whole important is we need to think about trying to transform our student teachers into the one who can author their own teaching. That's probably the focus, or will be the focus of teaching education programs. It won't, I mean, we won't be able to achieve this just by doing teaching practice, but it will be a whole program approach and trying to get them to think about their own practice and come up with their own answers, and use ideas from different sources for their objectives, rather than we force them to take our ideas.
All right. So what do you think, Professor Wong? It's like your center has a MA in TESOL, right, as well. So like, do you have any sharing about this topic?
It seems to me it's a teachable moment, the stress of practicum. You know, and as a teacher, a good teacher, the students feel quite relaxed and they feel empowered to learn. And I don't know, somehow, if a practicing teacher recognizing that cannot be achieved if they themselves do not feel empowered. And I don't know, it feels like, yeah, but I agree with Andy that that level of stress, you know, I don't know how many years will I teach, but that first day of class, you know, that's still anxiety. That is a little bit of the nature of the teaching. Yeah, but I don't know, it feels like there's lots of opportunity there to pull out what's going on and to turn it around, and why is this happening, and what is this, you know, what is it to be a teacher now versus a student, and yeah. Yeah.
I think, well, yeah, so I think a quick answer, yeah, that pops up in my mind just now is that perhaps it's important to let the student teachers to reflect what are the causes of the so-called stress or anxieties. We cannot just assume them, you know, they have certain causes. And on another dimension, I think it's indeed very challenging, because what they have learned from us in the teacher education institutions would be theories and prior experiences, but not the current experiences, right?
Yeah.
So they need to draw upon abstract theories written in specialist language, and then digest it and then embody such theories in a new context. So it has a lot of steps. They need to so-called transsemiotize from usually written language, to actions and practices. So it's a very complicated process. And also they need to do a lot of emotional labor. Right, emotional labor. They need to show care or compassion to their own students. And also our student teachers in our HK are really very young. They're really very young, and they may not share the same social cultural backgrounds. So for example, I talked with my colleagues in my department, and they said that they have found that not many students, especially nowadays, the university students would come from a less disadvantaged background. Whereas if you go to primary schools in Hong Kong, we see diversity of the social cultural backgrounds. They cannot really resonate with the students' difficulties and challenges. So that would lead to some problems and some, you know, some challenging moments in the day-to-day, teaching. So I think, so on one hand, it's important to enable our student teachers to do some self-reflection, and then really encourage our student teachers to go out. And this is a little bit cliche, but really go out to see the world a little bit more, out of their comfort zone a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, to me, teaching is something that is, you need to have natural occurrence. For example, I can say that it's more similar to you take a vaccine and then you'll be free of COVID-19. It's not true. I mean, teaching, you need to be exposed to different contexts, different school culture, different student background, and then you need to learn from experience. So when I teach the course in CTU MAT, so I mean, teaching about different approaches to language teaching, recover from communicative language teaching approach to other methods. I encourage my students not to just memorize these are the effective teaching approach. Sometimes even this very effective teaching approach is not effective when you go to the classroom. So I encourage them to be critical, trying to evaluate each method and see which method will be applicable in your school and classroom context.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this will be end of the closed session. So now we're going to open the discussion to the audiences online or on site. So do you have any questions?
Thank you. So I think Andy just now talked about the reflection on the different tasks that can be completed by technology and the different tasks that cannot be completed by technology. And Jack talked about the learning outside class. And we have this extensive body of research on good learners, like a good learner or a learner strategy. So just wonder, from your point of view, what would be the most important strategy or issue that students will have to pay attention to in this digital era?
I understand from colleagues that there's some work coming out that's looking at technology and showing that there's a bit of a U-shaped curve for students who can do technology, but who don't really understand how they're learning, and they don't have control over their own strategies. And then there's students who are very good learners. They understand how they're learning and how to progress, but they don't have good control over the technology. And it feels like this new brave new world that we really need to understand about how these come together. And again, a real opportunity that it's no longer being able to recite, tell dates, or any other kind of core basic knowledge base, but it's this combination of understanding your own abilities, knowing how you learn, knowing what the different strategies are, and then the real raw technology coming together.
I mean, Professor Wang's response reminds me of the importance of metacognition or self-regulation. I will add that the kind of critical self-regulation, critical metacognition, because otherwise we'll become entirely dependent on technology. And technology is supposed to give us freedom, but then we become enslaved by technologies. This is something is not something we would like to see happen. So I think the language learners or anybody who wants to use technology has to be aware that we should supposed to make technology work for us, not we become entirely dependent on technology and we lose the kind of autonomous agency in our life.
Yes, so I think that perhaps digital literacy and the ability to work with generative AI would be new direction in language education and language teacher education. Yeah, because it's not just to it's important not to be de-skilled by the emergence of new technologies. Yeah, so it's important to be able to, think of new ways of doing assessment and also curriculum design, so as to keep us, our students, competitive and having this critical capacity.
Just to add, like, I mean, think about 20 years ago in a classroom context, you don't have many technology, right? Chalk and talk, transparent, right? I mean, we need to think back to the origin point is like, what is the goal for teaching and learning, right? We want to make sure our student, our learner gain the objective out of our teaching. So if we see the technology is beneficial, go for it. Remember technology is just a tool. Yeah, so I think we need to think about that critically.
Any more questions? Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is, I mean, anyone can answer here. What what role teacher agency can play in an EMI classroom to make the classroom more linguistically inclusive? So just my question in perspective, since there since there is a strict English only policy wherever EMI has been implemented. So what role they can play? Thank you.
Well, I personally would like to use agency as a theoretical perspective to look at how EMI teachers respond to complex pedagogical situations in EMI classes. It's to do with how they respond to this the complexities of delivering a lesson in English as a medium instruction, and also maybe also related to their efforts to develop their professional capacity for teaching EMI classes. That kind of a efforts or responses that can be examined through the lens of teacher agency. And so I wouldn't say the role of agency in teaching EMI, but the role of a teacher agency in helping teachers to respond to the needs that are emerging in relation to the use of English as a medium instruction.
Yeah. So I echo with Andy about teacher agency. I think we can not only examine teacher agency in the context of EMI, but as a whole for teacher education. And then also need to regard the teacher themselves, whether they are beginner teachers or they have been teaching in an EMI context for many years. I think Andy and I have a paper on this topic as well, on teacher agency in EMI context. Maybe you can take a look on that, you will get more insight about this area, or maybe open up more research direction. I think there's something under research currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that there are many possible directions for teacher agency. And I think it's also important to expand our teachers' imagination of what they can do, what it means to be a teacher in different EMI contexts. Yeah.
Excellent.
So, all right, so I think we come to the end of this roundtable. We have touched upon different topics under language education, applied linguistics with your areas of expertise. And thank you so much for your very distinguished talks today. We benefited a lot from your sharing. Absolutely, we echo to this theme. We'll apply this to our language education program soon. And as we are our university is evolving, Thank you so much. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, please. Oh, All right, next, so let me invite our head professor, Dr. Leung, to give our closing remark. Thank you.
Right, so as we come to the close of this symposium, I would like to express my gratitude to our 4 distinguished speakers for their insightful and thought-provoking presentations. So today's discussions have truly embodied the theme of appliable linguistics and language education, shedding light on the complexities as well as opportunities in the ways in which appliable linguistics can be conducive to language learning and teaching. So I'm sure all of you here will agree with me that our 4 distinguished speakers today have broadened our horizons in terms of the role of language teacher agency in a multilingual world, the importance of bridging theory and practice in applied linguistics, no matter we're actually building a bridge or having a boat. The challenges and opportunities in teaching science, chemistry in particular, through English, and last but not least, the potential of translanguaging and transknowledging in plurilingual settings. These discussions have not only enriched our understanding, but also highlighted the need for continuous research and innovation in language education. They have underscored the importance of fostering a sense of agency among language teachers, recognizing the value of scholarship, style, and creating inclusive learning environments. Collectively, the 4 talks today have illuminated the incredible potential of appliable linguistics to revolutionize language education. I also want to give a huge thank you to the organizing committee, volunteers, and staff members who have worked their socks off behind the scenes to make sure everything is in order. Your dedication and attention to detail have really paid off. These symposiums wouldn't have been possible without all of you. And let's not forget about our sponsors and supporters, Hong Kong Metropolitan University and Wu Jie-yi Charitable Foundation. Their beliefs in the importance of this symposium have enabled us to have the necessary resources and facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, let us carry forward the insights and inspirations we have gained today. Let us continue to strive for excellence in language education, fostering a rewarding and fulfilling learning experience for our students, and enhancing our research capacity. Once again, thank you all of you for your participation and contributions to this symposium. We look forward to continuing with all of you these important conversations and collaborations in the future. Last but not the least, happy 35th birthday to Hong Kong Metropolitan University. Thank you very much.